the three trades you made, and how are you going to use all three?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the two that we just made today. As y'all heard, we traded Alex Scherf to the Twins for right-handed reliever Hansel Robles. And we also traded Michael Chavis to the Pirates for left-handed reliever Austin Davis. Both these guys will be good additions to our bullpen depth. Robles is a guy with power stuff, mainly fastball changeup, but a power arsenal, really good stuff, a lot of experience. And, as everybody has seen, our bullpen's done a great job this year. And we wanted to back that up by getting them reinforcements just to make sure we have as many good options as possible down the stretch. We're excited for his power stuff, playing in our mix with the already great crew we have down there. And as for Davis, more of a classic left-handed reliever. This was an area that we went in feeling like we could strengthen ourselves in terms of the depth of lefty relievers in the organization and in the upper levels of the organization. Tough to move Michael, obviously, first-round pick here. Who's been here for a long time, is really special to a lot of people here. But ultimately, we felt this was a price worth paying for someone who we feel has the upside to help us. He's got good fastball breaking ball combination that we think is going to help us, especially as we head down the stretch, and we know we're going to be facing some good left-handed hitters. And then last night we acquired Kyle Schwarber from the Nationals for prospect right-hander Aldo Ramirez. Simply put, we think Kyle Schwarber is one of the most impactful hitters that changed hands this week. And we had identified going into this week that a left-handed bat was going to be a target of ours and a huge addition to our lineup. We already feel we have a really good lineup. Kyle, once he's healthy, he's currently rehabbing hamstring injury, has a chance to be as productive as anybody in the lineup. And we're really excited for what he's going to mean beyond what he produces on the field. This guy is a winner, an incredible clubhouse presence, and we feel really good about what he's going to bring to our mix.
Can you talk about your starting rotation? And do you feel, even with the addition of Sale, is it strong enough to last in the postseason?
Well, we feel really good about that group. They've helped get us where we've gotten, and we're about to get deeper and about to add a lot more impact. We certainly look this week for ways to add, and I told you guys that going in, and we had a lot of different conversations about a lot of different possibilities. Obviously, if we had seen something, if we had matched up on something that we thought made sense for us and made sense for the organization, we would have pulled the trigger. Ultimately, despite a ton of conversations, we didn't line up on anything. But that's that's not the fact that we tried to add to the group isn't an indictment of the guys we have. We really like the group we have. We were just looking for any possible way to make us stronger, as long as we thought it was going to be helpful to the organization.
How do you see using Kyle Schwarber? Obviously, defensively, it seemed like first base was a big need, but he doesn't have any experience there. Really.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we would have been able to get someone with Kyle's impact, who also has a lot of first base experience. He doesn't. We are going to take a look at him over there. He's excited to do it. This is someone I would not bet against to really do anything that he sets his mind to on a baseball field. This is a guy who blew out his knee and hit 400 in the World Series in the same year. So I wouldn't bet against him. But even if that doesn't come to pass, we think the impact with the bat is huge, and there's going to be a lot of ways for him to help us. It's going to allow us to feature much stronger lineups, especially against right-handed pitching. It's going to allow us to take care of our guys down the stretch, give more days off when needed to some of the guys we've been leaning on. It's going to deepen our bench, when he's in there and when he's not. If we get to go, it's a weapon we can really, really leverage in very important games at the end. So hopefully, we're excited to see what working with him at first base is going to bring, but we really like the impact even without that.
What do you hear about his timing as far as when you think you'll get him back?
Well, we want to get our hands on him and get a plan together with our medical staff. We went into this with the expectation that we're probably looking at a couple of weeks. The hamstring injury that he suffered at the beginning of the month was pretty severe, but he's made really good progress. He's been hitting on the field for a while now. It's really just the running component in there. Of course, you all saw how hot he was with the bat when he went down. He's done a lot of work hitting wise to stay there. Hopefully, when he comes back, he'll be able to pick up right where he left off.
Chaim, do you have any roster moves, I guess, for tonight's game?
We're still working through that. We're going to obviously announce them before the game, but we have a lot of different moving parts here to figure out, who's coming when and the order of operations there. So I don't have anything too specific to announce right now, but we will have it all sorted out by the time the game starts.
Is it hard? I know you always preach, patience and that type of stuff, but is it difficult to see, like the Yankees adding Gallo and Rizzo, and then the Blue Jays with Barrios, the Rays with Cruz, and not get the itch to, go all in? Obviously, Schwarber's a big move, but just kind of to avoid, making moves you might regret later.
Yeah, of course it is. We want to win, and we're really passionate about what we do. We know how hard it is to get to this position, and we don't take that for granted. But at the same time, I've said it all along, and I mean it. We want to win a lot, and we want to win every year. And if you want the future to be really good, you have to take care of the future, and you have to care about that. And that's a very difficult tightrope to walk. It's a tough balance. I think it was really tough this year in what I think turned out to be a big time seller's market in a lot of cases. But that's why we just need to stay strong in our plan. And try to walk that tightrope as much as we can. I would note a couple of things. One, I don't want to sell short. I'm glad you mentioned Schwarber, the additions that we made. Like I said, I think Kyle's impact with the bat is on a par with anybody who was traded in the last 48, 72 hours. As soon as we can get him back on the field. But the other thing I would note is that part of the reason why we are here this year and why we are in first place at the trade deadline is because of contributions that came from people who are here because we were taking that longer view and because we weren't selling out for short-term gratification at every turn. That doesn't mean you will always reap those short-term rewards when you do the right thing for the long term. But if you don't, you will definitely pay for it in the long term. You might not get what you're looking for in the short term. And a lot of what we saw today that our competitors did, they were in a position to do because they had done the right thing and the disciplined thing over a long period of time to build up that organizational strength and to build up a huge trove of young players that they could then either use to help their clubs or to move in trades. And I'm really happy with where we've come, but we have a long way to go. And so to, turn our backs on what got us here, and especially some of, what got us here also got us the short-term rewards that have put us in first place right now. I think to turn our backs on that would really, at the end of the day, be irresponsible. And I don't think we'd be doing right by anybody if we did that.
And just to follow up, how much of a role did staying under the CBT threshold play this week or, in the lead up? It seems like from what's out there, and obviously you're probably not going to get into the specific numbers, but it seems like you're kind of walking a tightrope there.
Yeah, we were mindful of it. I think we have to be because there are implications to crossing that line that go beyond just money. And some of those implications actually hurt our competitiveness and could hurt our, our talent base over time. So we were mindful of it, but it was never a hard line. We just looked at it that, we did explore a lot of possibilities this week that would have taken us over. We just looked at it as something that it's something we need to factor in. Was it worth the cost? And ultimately, there were some things that we explored that we certainly would have done that for, but we just didn't feel that it was worth the cost in talent, let alone the additional effects of going over the line.
I'm two questions. It seemed earlier in the week the consensus throughout the game was that it was going to be more of a buyer's market and that prices would come down in the last 24 hours. Why do you suppose that changed? And in reference to what you just said about being mindful of protecting your inventory of prospects, do you think that as much progress as you've made, you haven't quite deepened it enough to maybe make some deals that other teams did and that you weren't quite comfortable to do at this point?
Yeah, both are good questions. And look, there are people out there that might disagree with me calling it a seller's market. Everybody can have their own assessment of what went on. We just tried to stay active in as many fronts as we possibly could, and get a sense of what the asks would have been and were from us, for certain players that moved. And we were prepared to do the things that we thought made sense. And that's not to say that the future always wins every time. We were prepared to pay some long-term costs as long as we felt it was reasonable, felt it was appropriate. We just didn't. Why that happened, I don't know. It was really interesting to see everything that was happening all around us. But I think the worst thing you can do at the end of the day is start being reactive to that instead of staying with what you need to take care of. And like I said, I think part of why we are where we are is because we have stayed focused on the priorities that we have, and some of the people who have gotten us where we are here because we kept that focus. As far as the other question, look, my mindset is always going to be that we could always have more talent, right? That you never feel like you have enough. At the same time, the more that you have, the more responsible I think it is to then make some of those big moves. There's a lot of different things that go into that, because the more that you have, the brighter you think your future outlook is, even with spending some of that currency now. So I'll never think it's strong enough, but ultimately we just tried to weigh that were closer calls, and some of which frankly weren't even all that close.
This month, both the rotation and the bullpen have the numbers have gone down in both cases. How much of a concern is the state of the pitching staff moving forward? And do you think that the two bullpen moves that you've made plus Chris will be sufficient to get the entire back to the performance level you need?
Yeah, we are in the middle of kind of a longer and a tougher stretch. We're looking forward to August bringing us a few more off days than we've experienced recently, and there has been an effect to that, a cumulative effect, I think, on our group, and that's with our coaching staff and our medical staff and the players themselves doing an amazing job to try to maintain themselves, and I think that's shown so far in how healthy they've been, but certainly. There have been dips in performance here and there. These things go in cycles sometimes. Not everybody's going to be at their peak performance all the time, and that's not always because of fatigue. Some of that is just the nature of the game. But that is why we wanted to go out and make some additions, just to take some pressure off the folks who are here. We know we've got some guys, obviously Chris being the most prominent, who are coming back from injury, who can jump in. And we're going to do our best to make sure we schedule everybody to keep everybody healthy as we head down the stretch here.
And in terms of it being what you characterized as a seller's market, entering the deadline, would you have been surprised if someone told you in advance you'll come away with a bat and two relief depth options?
No, not necessarily. I don't know that there's an outcome that could have surprised me. There are a lot of different things that we explored, including some longer term options that would have also been impactful this year. That players, better known and lesser known players, that we thought were really good fits for what we're trying to build. A lot of things that we were hoping to line up on in that regard that we didn't. But I don't think you can ever be surprised. Like I said, I think we put in the same amount of work, and it's just as frenzied, whether we make no moves or 10 moves or anywhere in between. It certainly felt, even going back to yesterday, the pace of the day, the amount of action that was happening, the profile of some of the players that were changing hands, especially the day before the deadline, that was a little different this year. It definitely, I think there was a different pace to it, and just a different tone, really, going back to yesterday morning, at least in terms of the conversations we were having.
How much are you counting on Sale to being close to 100% in the last 6 weeks?
Well, obviously the closer to 100% he is, the better. When he's 100%, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. I think that would, we hope we get that. I think it's almost too much to ask from someone coming back from what he's coming back from. It does happen sometimes. Look, wherever he is, he is. As I mentioned, we weren't going to let the fact that he was coming back stop us from trying to add to the group. we also want to make sure if we were going to do that, we were going to do it in a way that we could justify and that we felt okay about when we put our heads on the pillow tonight. So we're so excited to have him back, not just for what it's going to mean on the mound, but for what he's going to mean to the group, the competitor, the leader that he is. And wherever he's at, that's we're going to be excited about it.
Chaim, there was a report that ownership encouraged you to make a push for Max Scherzer. I'm wondering if that's true, if you can address that at all. And secondly, if you had any sense of whether he would even accept a trade to Boston.
Yeah, I obviously can't explain everything that gets out there. Without getting into any specific. I'm not going to address whether as a player who's not our player what he may or may not have done, but I will say that report isn't true. We felt nothing but supported and encouraged by ownership. Obviously, talked to them a lot about different possibilities and things that we might do, but there was never any pressure to do anything other than what's right for the Red Sox and what's right for our goal of sustainable championship baseball.
And just one follow-up, what do you say to fans and maybe reactionary media members, like some of us on this call, including me, who say that, wish that maybe you had done a little bit more?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, especially when things are flying left and right like they have been the last 48 hours, any fan would love to see their team right in the thick of it, and you love to see your team, making big moves. We would too. We just aren't going to do that, when we think those moves are actually running counter to our goal. We know how high the expectations of our fans are, and if we do something for short-term gratification that has too high a long-term price, we're going to end up letting them down more than we're going to help them. It might be fun today. You may or may not get what you're hoping for over the last 2 months, but you certainly are going to pay the price for years to come. Like I said, there were some moves, including the ones that we made, where we did feel there was some price that we paid, and it was a price we were willing to pay. There were a lot of things, that were put to us where we just felt we're not doing our jobs, and ultimately we are going to let our fans down, whether it be tomorrow or whether it be next year, the year after, or all of the above, if we do some of the things that we could have done to make more of a splash.
Chaim, you've mentioned that sustained competitiveness is pretty much what you want and what you want to achieve. You're not willing to sacrifice that. What role did, we've talked about Sale, but also Duran and Houck and their ability to perhaps affect outcomes play in the deadline decisions? And was there anything that could have moved you to make a decision that may have created a long-term problem but a short-term championship fix?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those guys are a big part of what we're trying to do. So is everybody who's on this roster, and a lot of guys who are not on the active roster right now who may yet figure into this thing, whether they're on the IL or whether they're in Worcester or both. Those are also some of the guys, as you can imagine, when you were trying to do some of the things that we talked about over the last few days, those are the guys that other teams want. Those are the price you're expected to pay, and ultimately we didn't feel that was worth it. You ask, are there things we would have been willing to do to sacrifice the long term for the short term? Yeah, it's just a question of where's the right point, walking that tightrope. I think it's very rare that you get an opportunity where you are really boosting yourself in the short term and also helping yourself in the long term. You hope to do that, and sometimes you are able to do that, but those moves are rare, and some of those you're dependent on the market being in a specific place that really lines up. Most of the time, that's not the case. And I think when you're in a situation like this, you are, and we were willing, to make some of those sacrifices because we understand how precious a position we're in, how many things have to go right to be in first place in the American League East at the trade deadline. It's just a question of how much. And in a lot of these cases, we just felt like there would be too much of a long-term sacrifice, and we'd ultimately be letting our fans down, and we would be in for a lot more losing than winning when you zoom out past the next 2 months.
I'm in
Go ahead, Sean.
Go ahead. In terms of Schwarber's usage, have you spoken to him about catching at all? Is he willing to do that? Do you see that as a way to get his bat in there at all?
We haven't talked about that. We did talk about the first base thing, obviously that being, more of a need, you might say. We like our catchers. So I wouldn't necessarily rule anything out, but it's not something I anticipate as a regular option. I would bet, even though we haven't brought up to him, he's the type of guy that he would do it. This guy will do, the first thing he said, actually, just because of how much was going on, BOH spoke to him first, and then I spoke to him. He's pumped up to be here. Basically, the first thing he said was, how much he loves Boston, and he's here to help us win a championship. And I think I would bet that if he thinks something is going to help us do that, then he'd be willing to do it, just about whatever it is.
Chaim, you have a number of guys that you're going to face 40-man roster decisions on coming up. Did you find the level of interest in those guys significant to a point where you feel like you could maybe get more done in the offseason as opposed to now?
We'll see. There were certainly moves, that we discussed that where we could have, moved some of those guys now. Obviously, again, if it had been something we felt was worth it, we would have done it. And we just didn't, I went into the week thinking we might line up on more of those than we actually did. It just didn't line up in all cases. Obviously, it did a little bit in the two deals that we made today. So it was definitely something we explored. I said it coming into the week and kind of, going back a few weeks, that it's definitely something we're mindful of, and it's still going to be an issue that we're going to have to navigate going forward. So we put value on it this week. It was a factor in our discussions. But ultimately, we lined up on the things that we lined up on.
And do you see David? Do you see Davis coming to the big league roster right away?
Yeah, that's our expectation. He does have an option left, so we may have some movement obviously over the course of the month, as we know we have guys that are working their way back and different things that could happen. But that's our expectation, at least to start.
Is there any concern just with Schwarber at first, with the hamstring and kind of coming off the IL, and also, Christian Arroyo obviously trying that position and also, suffering an injury too? Is there concern just since he's never played there before?
Yeah, for sure. We got to be careful with it as we explore this. And like I said, it's not a necessity. If it does not happen, then, we still feel really good about what he's going to bring to the table. And we have to make sure we're doing it in a way that doesn't jeopardize his health more than anyone's health is at risk by being out on the baseball field, because it's too important that we keep him healthy so he can hit and have an impact in our lineup.
If
I'm with Duran up, obviously it's kind of a crowded outfield mix already. So let's say Schwarber at first base doesn't work exactly as you hope, and he goes back to left field. Is that something you're mindful of that could be a tricky situation considering how many guys you have out there?
Yeah. That could happen. This was something where we were good erring on the side of having too many good players, even if a lot of them might end up playing the same position. I talked about that coming into this, where, we were just as open to adding to a strength as we were plugging a hole. In this case, we may end up having done both depending on how this works out. But, we know that who we have now is who we're going to have. Different things happen. And even if everybody's healthy, you can get guys rest when you otherwise might not be able to. You can play matchups better. You can have impactful players coming off the bench. There are all sorts of ways that adding to a strength can help you win games. So we're mindful of it. It's gonna, we discussed it with Alex over the last couple of days, especially as the Schwarber thing was taking shape. If he had 10 years of first base experience, would this be a cleaner fit? Absolutely. Again, I would not bet against this guy, and he is going to be motivated to figure it out. And I think that he's got a good chance to, but even if it doesn't, I think it gives Alex a lot of interesting options. And, you guys know how adept he is at using the players that he has at his disposal. And, once Kyle's healthy, he's going to have a really impactful player to add to this mix to help win ball games.
Hi, you mentioned, other teams kind of being in a better position to be more aggressive right now because of what they've done in the past to get here. How close do you feel like you are to being in that position?
It's a good question. I think it's obviously relative. Just because you're in a great position doesn't necessarily mean you want to go out and do something irresponsible. I think a lot depends, but it makes you more able to be aggressive without feeling like you're being irresponsible. If you have depth, if you have redundancy, it's easier to, use, players in trades than it is if you're dependent on them with nothing behind them. So even when you're in that position, and we see some clubs that are able to sustain this winning for a long period of time, it's because they keep generating young talent, whether they bring it back in trades, whether they generate it through their system. And we need to be in that position too. So I don't know if there's like a finish line that I can look at. I just know that, at least in my opinion, some of the things that were put in front of us, I didn't feel like they made sense given the entire context.
Yeah, we can take a couple more. We have to get Alex in for his pregame session before tonight's game. Go ahead.
Just from a historical context, how would you evaluate, this deadline with the quality of star level talent that moved and also the prospects that moved? Generally, the deadline at times seems to fall a little short from where the expectations are. How would you evaluate this deadline?
And I'd probably need to get at least one good night of sleep before I could properly answer that question. It's probably best for other people to assess. It certainly seemed pretty active. Look, I think it's great for baseball when that happens. We talked about it before that, a fan of any team likes to see their team in the headlines. We sometimes need to look past that in terms of the things that we do and don't do. But it was active. I think the thing that stood out to me, because players change hands every year at a time like this. Like I said, the thing that stood out to me, sort of being in our room, so to speak, was how early it sort of felt like deadline day. Even going back to yesterday morning, the same urgency, the same pace was there that some years you don't really even see sink in until 10 or 11 a.m. on the day of the deadline. That stood out to me.
All right. There's nothing else. Thank you, Chaim. Thanks everyone for your time and joining us on here. And I'll let Justin get Alex score ready for his pregame session. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate your patience. Sorry to be late.